Okay, we are on YouTube. Okay. Actually, we're going to have to start from where we left off in the morning, I guess. So that's over here. That's Nichtov, the Nichtov Beresha. So we have to start from here because there's some people here that we're not.
Is that in 6B or 7A?
6B. We're 6B center. We'll do it quickly. We were discussing the psukim from where we know that you have to start preparing for Yom Tov 2 weeks before. And in order to prove that Moshe Rabbeinu gave instructions on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we made a hekesh from 2 psukim that have in it the word Bamidbar. And in one pasuk it just says B'Chodesh Harishon. The other pasuk it says B'Chodesh Hasheni Be'echad LaChodesh. So since both psukim have the word Bamidbar, we assume that when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Klal Yisrael, it was Be'echad LaChodesh. So let's just quickly look at the 2 psukim that were brought down. So the first pasuk was V'yidaber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai b'shon ha'shenis l'tzeis ha'meretz Mitzrayim b'chodesh harishon leimer. It doesn't say what day it was, but it's the first month, right? We know it's the first month b'chodesh harishon. So if you could see in the small letters, that's b'midbar perak tes. The next pasuk is V'yidaber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai b'ayil moed b'echad l'chodesh hasheni Rosh Chodesh of the second month. Where is that? B'midbar aleph. So for the Gemara, I don't understand. If this is in the second month and this is in the first month, why is this Bamidbar Aleph, Bamidbar Tes? It's out of order. So for the Gemara, it's out of order. Wouldn't it make more sense for the pasuk talking about Chodesh Nisan to come first and then V'hadu Nichtoi the Chodesh Sheni? Zok Gemara, Amar B'nashem Bar Tachlifa Mishmei Derav, Zoy Seimer, saying Muktam U'u'ucher B'Torah. The Torah is not written in chronological order, and you cannot bring a raya from the order that that's really the way it was. In fact, from here we see exactly the opposite, that the Torah is out of order. Amar Papa, Lo Yamara, and this that we said, that you cannot assume that the Torah is written in order, is El B'Trei Yoneh. That's if it's 2 different parshias. Parak Aleph, Parak Beis, Parak Gimel. If it's within the same immediate area, there, everything is in order. If you don't say that, there are certain limudim in that we know that are things Torah and Dreshus Ben that rely heavily on the order. For instance, we have Allah ein b'chlal al prat. Well, who said you ever have a klalu prat? Dilma pradu klalu. Maybe it's out of order. Besu, the opposite case. Pradu klal, nasa klal moisav al prat. Same question. You never know if you say the Torah is never in order, then you can never really learn anything from the order of anything in the Torah. And we know there are limudim that specifically rely on the order. So elamai must be that when do you not say that the Torah is written in chronological order? That's in 2 different parshas. But in one parsha, it's in order. And usually the klal prat is in one parsha. It's within a couple of psukim of each other. So there you can assume everything's in order.
I found the pasuk. I found one place that Rashi says it's out of order within the same pasuk.
Really?
Events in the same pasuk. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu put his wife and his children on the Chamor on their way to Yerushalayim. It says he put their wife and the children, and they went to Mitzrayim, and he took his mata. Okay, so Rashi comments that it's out of order. It really means he also took his mother and he went to Mitzrayim. So you see that within the same pasuk it could be out of order.
Interesting. A good art. I don't know. Very, very, very interesting. Is there a drasha that Rashi learns from it?
Not that I saw.
Wow.
Just makes a quick comment and that's it.
Wow. That's very interesting. Okay, so Dr. Gemara, if you're going to say that for the purposes of learning a klal prat, you know that it has to be in order, well, I feel betraying Yaninami, because you find sometimes a klal prat where they're in different parshas. Dr. Gemara, klal prat If you hold you could never learn a klal prat when they're not right beside each other, then you're fine because in fact only the inyan echad in one parsha are you darshan the klal prat. And the madam are done. If you hold you could darshan the klal prat when they're distant, Michael and Neymar. How are you going to explain this? He said ein muktim amocher. So tomorrow afilu madam are done hanamili bechad yon. That's only if it's in the same sugya, talking about Shabbos, talking about Yom Tov, talking about the same idea. I will betray Yonah, but if it's two different Yonim, you're right. Ain't done him, we would not done Klal Prat, because in fact it could be out of order. Dok the Gemara writer. I'm going to read the Gemara. Avoid tzarich shibach. Even if you make Vedikas Chometz, after you make Vedikas Chometz, you have to say Kol Chamir, V'Chamir, Dika B'Shusi, you have to be Mavakel. My time, or why? In any Mishum Peruin, if you're going to say because it's inevitable that there'll be some crumbs left over, and you don't want to be over by your because you have those crumbs, so you're Mavakel them. In fact, the Gemara, Halach Hashivi. They have no chashivas, so they're automatically bottled. Nobody gives any value to crumbs on the floor. If you want to claim that it doesn't matter if you're not mashing them, but since they're within your home and you protect your home, so the fact that it's contained within your protected home, that in and of itself makes it choshev, and therefore you'll be over by your Rabbi Yosy. By the time we learned that even if it's something that's protected within your home or within walls, if you don't care about it, it's still considered hefker. Because we learned this follows. What if you had in your field fig trees? All the figs are basically off, but there's a couple of leftover figs, hard, old, and you don't want them. But in the shamer shadei, but you're still not leaving your field open. You're still walking your field because you happen to have grape vines there, and those grapes you want to protect. So the te'enim are being protected, but they're only being protected because of the grapevines that are in that field. Or soifei anavim, or you have grapes that you're not interested in. Or mishamer sadei with makshois and with matlois for some other plants you have there. So bisman shebalabais makbid aleihem. If the balabais is makbid, even on those bad grapes or those bad figs, then Asurim Mishim Gesel. Nobody's allowed to steal them. They belong to me. And the Chayavim B'Maiser. If I want to use them, I have to take off Maiser. But Bisman She'ein Balabais Makbid Alevi. If I don't care about those at all, I'm really only interested in my grapes or in my Kishuin or Gluin, then Mutar Mishim Gesel. Then the pears that I have no interest in, if someone takes them, no problem. He's allowed to because it's Hefker. And because of that, Mutar Mishim Maiser. I have no Chiv Maiser. They're considered Hefker. So crumbs that are locked up in a house should be no different. I have no interest in them. They should be hefker. So how could you say that you need to make bittul on the chometz because of those crumbs? With those crumbs, you don't need to make bittul. Those crumbs are bottle anyway. So Rava said, imagine you didn't make bittul. And what's going to happen is on Pesach, you find a delicious mezainis, and you're going to hesitate for a second before you mevatel it. In that second that you hesitate, you're going to be over by your Rabbi Yosy. Therefore, if you're mevatel everything, as soon as you make bedika, so then whenever you find it, it doesn't matter. You were already mevatel. In fact, the Gemara b'chimishkachas le'levatel. Why don't you say that when you find it, you're mevatel, and you're not over it? Say that as soon as you find it, you're mevatel it. So tomorrow we're afraid we're afraid you're going to find this after the Simana Isur. At that point, it's Asher Bana. And if it's Asher Bana, it's as if you don't have any ownership in it anymore. And if you don't have any ownership in it, you can't be mevatel. So you're going to ask me if I don't have any ownership in it because it's Asher Bana, so then why am I over Bal Yirah for it? I don't own it anymore. If I can't be mevatel and I don't own it, so why am I over Bal Yirah? So tomorrow, Rabbi Elazar says there's a paradox. There's two paradoxes in Shas that's just the way it is. Shnei Devar, there's two things. Einon B'Shusa Shel Adam. They're technically not in a person's possession, and nevertheless, the Torah treats it. But the Torah treats it halachically as if you do own it. For instance, what are the two things? The Elohein Bar B'Shusa Rabim. If you dig a bar in B'Shusa Rabim, you're chayav for anybody who falls into that bar who gets damaged by that bar, even though you don't own it. But the Torah treats it like it's yours in order to be mechayiv you for any damage that this bar causes. Chametz is no different. Chametz Meshei Shoysh L'mayla. I'm sorry, Chametz Meshei Shoysh L'mayla. Chametz, once you're past this Mana Isser, it doesn't belong to you, yet the Torah makes you be over the Isser Bal Yorah Bal Yimatzeh, even though it's Asher Bana. So because of that, you have to make Bittul Chametz right after your Bedika, which is the night before Pesach. Frankly, Gemara, why make the Bittul so early? The Niftale Ba'arba, the Niftale B'Chametz. We know, when do we burn our Chametz? We burn our Chametz at the beginning of the 6th hour. And at the beginning of the 5th hour, we stop eating Chametz. So why don't we make Bittul then, when we stop eating the Chametz? Zakt Gemara, Kivan the Lav Zman Yisurahu, the Lav Zman Biurahu. It's not a time where we're doing anything. It's not the Zman Isur, which is by the 6th hour. It's not the time when we're Mevayired. It's Nishi Nishteher. It's not the Shash B'dika. So because of that, we're afraid Dilma Pashav Mevatlei. If we want to connect the Bittul Chametz to a Maisa, to an activity that you're doing. So we'd rather link it either to the Sreifas of Chametz or to the Bedika. So we're linking it to the Bedika. Anywhere in the middle, there's no specific time there, and we don't want to tell you to do it then because we're afraid you'll forget. But if we say do it after the Bedika, then it's safe.
Has the Gemara ever said anywhere that we do bittul at night? Have we learned that yet?
This is it.
This is it? By asking Akasha, why not do it during the day?
Yeah.
Interesting.
The Bedika, the bittul that we make after we do Bedika's comments, the Gemara says, why is it necessary? Why is it necessary to do it at night? Do it the next day. Zaktamar v'niftale b'shis. So just be mevatel the chametz by chatzois. Zaktamar, I'm sorry, not b'shis, not by chatzois, by the 6th hour at 11 o'clock be mevatel it. So it's not yet asher b'hana. Zaktamar, even the isur derabban niluya, since we know at 11 o'clock midirabbanan it's asher b'hana. Therefore, kidayrai sedamyo, we look at it like an isur hana, which doesn't belong to you anymore. The lav yeshuzei kaime, and therefore you cannot be mevatel it because once it's asher b'hana midirabbanan, you can no longer be mevatel. Well, then what's a mitzvah? Where do you find that if it's asher b'hana midirabbanan, we treat it like it's not yours? So the Gemara, the Amar of Gidul, Amar of Chia Bar Yosef, Amar Rav, HaMekadesh. If someone is Mekadesh a lady, Mishei Shoyes Ulamayla, which means after the Isser of Chametz, and Rashi tells us it's Mitchilas Sheish. It's not yet in the afternoon. It's rather at the beginning of the 6th hour, like 11 o'clock. The Isur Derabbanan, it's only also Derabbanan. I did not say right pshat when we learned from Shul. I didn't speak out this Rashi. I thought that it's Chametz Midrabbanan, but that's not what Rashi is saying. Rashi is saying it's Chametz Gomer, but it's in the case of Isur Derabbanan. Afilu b'chiti kurdenisa, even if you use chuti kurdenisa, what's significant about chiti kurdenisa? Rashi that tzemchim b'hari ararat, they grow in the mountains, but ararat, kashin hein ma'oi, they're very hard. Afilu hachi, and since they're very hard, it's very hard for them to become chametz. Afilu hachi, the Rashi, ein choishin l'kedushin. If someone made a kedushin with these wheat, it would not be a good kedushin. Im bo alei, of course, if they got wet. Because if they didn't get wet, they're not chametz. The asi iser hanos chametz the rabbanon the sheish. Now the rabbanon are saying, the rabbanon it's not yours, and therefore it's not a good kedushin. Correct Rashi, it's only asher b'hana the rabbanon. How could it be malka kedusha Torah? Midai Raisa, I'm giving this woman something of value. So she's an eshes. How could the rabbanon say no? We don't think it has value, and therefore she's not an eshes. Midarashi does have value. So how could they go and be Shari Eshes Lahoma?
Don't we say Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael?
Yeah, that's exactly what Rashi answers. So Metatzinin Yechama Duchtin, called the Mekadesh, Adati the Rabbanim Mekadesh, the Hefker Bez Hefker, then Hefker Mamoina. He said Kedash Moshe v'Yisrael, and the Rabbanim said this is not going to be a Kedushin because we're taking this money away from you. So exactly like what you answered. But whatever the case is, you see clearly that even though there's only an Isser, it's perceived like a real Isser. So therefore, you cannot be mevatel the chametz right before it becomes usher, but no lidrabona, because you'll still have a problem. So you can't be mevatel chametz right after it becomes usher but not lidrabona, because you're still going to have a problem.
What if he doesn't say that? Kedas Moshe Yisrael. Still
Well,
have.
they can still be mafkir the money and make it not his. That's like asking me what happens if you don't sign the ticket that the cop gives you. You still have to pay it. Okay. Zag the Gemara weiter. Frank the Gemara ulubasar isura loy matzim mevatalei. Are you suggesting that you cannot be mevatal something once it's usher bano? I'm going to show you a raya from a brisa where the brisa is telling you to be mevatal something even though it's usher bano. What time we learn? How you yoshe the beis hamedrash. You were sitting and learning the beis hamedrash. In this year, you remembered sheyesh chametz b'soich beis, that you have chametz in your house. So the halach is mevatle believa. You could be mevatle. Echad Shabbos, if this occurs on Shabbos. V'echad Yom Tov, inside this occurs on Yom Tov. So let's figure this out. If you cannot be mevatle chametz once it's usher bano already, let's figure out when this happened. Bishlom is Shabbos. Bishlom if it happened on Shabbos. Eshkachas lakagoyin shechol arba osar liyas b'Shabbos. Erev Pesach b'Shabbos. He was in the Bismedrish before his mandir. He remembered he has chametz there, so he had to quickly be mevatel it before his mandir. That works out. Eliyamtiv, if he's already on the first day of Pesach, it's asur bahano already. Basar isuruhu. Yet the Brisa still says mevatel believa. So how could you claim that you cannot be mevatel chametz once it's already asur bahano? This Brisa seems to indicate, in fact, that you could. So Amar Bacha Yaakov, Hacha b'Talmud Yosy b'Knei Rabbi Yaskinan. We're speaking about a Talmud sitting and learning by his Rebbe. And he remembered that he had dough in his house, non-chametz dough. But if you let it sit there, it's going to become chametz. But he can't walk out of his Rebbe shir. And he's afraid it'll become chametz. So what can he do there? They'll be mevatel before it becomes chametz. So on Yom Tov, you have a simple way where you could mevatel it. You mevatel something that's not chametz yet before it becomes chametz. And the economy, it makes sense to say that the situation is such that he couldn't leave to deal with the non-chametz before it became chametz. The Katani Hayoyoshe b'Sach Beis Hamedrash Mamina. If we're just talking about Isir Anah, who cares where he was? He could have just said if he has Isir Anah, he can be mevatel. From the fact that the Brisa takes the case of Yosy b'Sach Beis Hamedrash seems to indicate that he's stuck and he can't get home to deal with it. And that would be consistent with learning that it was dough that needed to be dealt with, or else it would become chametz. For this Gemara just as Akdoma, people know matzah. We know matzah is that crunchy matzah that we have. To a Svardi, according to the Beis Yosef, the matzah that we eat is only a boyer min mezainis. So they use pita like lafa. So if you have two pieces of lafa, one's chametz and one's matzah, it would be pretty difficult to look at them and determine which one was chametz and which one was matzah. So
That's it's only mazonos during the year.
Oh, you use regular matzah on Pesach?
A regular matzah on Pesach. But
I had a friend, a Syrian, who used to eat pizza on Pesach. And I told him anyway, you eat chametz, you eat rice, you eat beans, you eat chametz anyway, so big deal. So you eat pizza too.
Right, but during
you have regular matzahs?
I have regular, and the Moroccans were influenced by the Ashkenazim.
Are there any Sfardim that you know of that still use pita?
In New York, not here.
Uh-huh.
But either way, during the year we make mazonos on matzah.
On Pesach, you make mochi because it's good.
That's right.
You see, there's a little itchy in every Sfardim. Amar Rabba Barafuna. Amar Rabba Hapasha Ipsa. You have a piece of pita, and it's old, it's stale. So you're not sure if it was matzah that was recently prepared, or if it was chametz because it's stale. It must be older bread. So you look at the bread box. Kivan sheripta matzah muteris. If you normally keep Rashi in the stamish b'tevazu matzah yoysim chametz, if you use in this bread box more matzah the chametz, you go basaroy. Now this doesn't really make any sense. And the Gemara is going to go through it and change.
The Suffolk Deraisa?
I'm sorry?
This is Suffolk Deraisa?
Yeah, the subject of its chametz.
Right.
So if Roiv the box, if most of the bread used in this box was chametz, you found this bread in the box, you'll assume it's chametz. But if most of the bread used in the box was matzah, and you find it in the box, you can assume it's kosher l'pesach. A little stale, but kosher l'pesach. You know, all our matzah is stale. Our matzah is baked Chanukah time. It's up to Gemara. What's going on here? It doesn't make sense. If you know this bread is chametz, then he rips a matzah mahava. It doesn't make a difference. Roiv not roiv. You know this is chametz. Ella must be the lo yadina ba ichametz hu matzahu. You have this piece of bread, and you can't quite tell if it's chametz or matzah. So, for Gemara, if that's the case, if you couldn't tell, my area ki rubs a matzah. Why do you need the roiv that the roiv of this bread box was used for matzah? Afilu kaloi rubs a matzah nami. Even if roiv of the bread in this box was used for chametz, but nasal basar brasser. Now we're on Pesach. So let's assume that when he made beer chametz on Erev Pesach, he cleaned out the box, and any bread you found in it is from after he cleaned it out, which was from matzah. Why would you assume that this is old bread from before Pesach? And I'll prove to you that whenever there's a changeover, like there is over here in this bread box, you change it over from chametz to matzah, you can assume that if you found an old piece of bread in there, that it was from the new batch, from after you cleaned it out. And I can prove it from the following price. Noise, our favorite subject, money, found money. What's more exciting than finding money? So what if you find money on the floor? You're in Yerushalayim, and there's animal dealers there, and you find money on the floor outside their store. Zok, the price of oila meiser. We can assume it's meiser, no matter when in the year it is. Now, of course, Yom Tov, when all the guests come to the Regel, they all bring their meiser with them. There's tons of meiser money around. But during the year, where it's just the local citizens, it's mostly chulin. Nevertheless, money found in front of a store that sells animals, we always assume is meiser. Why is that? Rashi tells us because people would come up with their meiser money to Yerushalayim. What do you do on the last day that you're in Israel with all the small change that you have of Xerish Kolam? You shove it back with you, or the first mashulach that gets you at the kosel, you give it to him because you don't want to shove it back. So too, these people had all this meiser money. They spent as much as they were able to buying food in Yerushalayim, but the leftover money, they're not going to schlep it back. So they give it to their friends, their local friends. They give it to them. What do they do with it? All they could really do is use it for meiser. So what they would normally do is they would buy carbon shlachim. So the vast majority of carbonas, of animals purchased, were purchased from Mois Meiser. Therefore, if you find money in front of an animal store, you're going to assume that it was Meiser money. What about the Harabayas? If you find money in Harabayas, chulin, it's chulin. So right off the bat, Tosfos asks, how could you find money on Harabayas? You're not allowed to bring your wallet onto Harabayas. So Tosfos says, you're not allowed to bring a wallet, and it should be obvious. If you have a couple of dollars stuck in your pocket, that's not a problem. That's it. So anything you find on Harabayas is chulin. And the reason for that is very simple. Yom Tov time, it's mostly Meiser money that's there. But people come to Harabayas all year long. And all year long, people have chulin money with them. So if you find money lying on Harabayas, you could have fell, not necessarily today, it could have fell 6 months ago. It could have fell any time in the year. And the vast majority of money that falls throughout the year is going to be chulin. So therefore, if you find money in Harabayas, it's chulin money. How about in the city of Yerushalayim, in the streets of Yerushalayim? It depends. B'shas haregel meiser. If you find money on the streets of Yerushalayim Yom Tov time, you'll assume it's meiser because that's what most of the money is in Yom Tov time. B'shayim Hashanah, the rest of the year, you'll assume it's chulin. So right away, this is difficult because why should Yerushalayim be any different than Harabayas? On Harabayas, we say you look at the entire year as a whole, and since in the entire year as a whole, most of the money that falls will be chulin. Therefore, no matter when you find money on Harabayas, it'll be chulin. By Yerushalayim, why also don't you look at the whole year? the whole year, there's a lot more chulin money on the streets of Yerushalayim than there are Maisha money. So why would we say on Yom Tov you assume it's Maisha money? My time, what's the reason for it? It's Hoyel v'shuke Yerushalayim asuyin v'yischabed b'chol yod. Yerushalayim, they're very makbid. Every single day, the entire streets were clean. And Rashi is they're clean with neatit because of dirt. They had a very clean city, similar to the way it is today. It's kept immaculately clean. So since every single day it was swept clean, you will assume that if you found money, the money that you found must have fell today. So therefore, if you find money on the street in Yerushalayim on Yom Tov, then you'll assume that it's Meiser because it fell today. Anytime else in the year, you'll assume it fell that day. But on Har HaBayis, you find money, it could have fell anytime because no one cleaned it. So if you wonder why in the world would you be so meticulous to clean the streets of Yerushalayim and not the streets of Har HaBayis? So for that, Rashi tells us it's because Har HaBayis, for one, was on an incline, it was a har, and it was windy, and people were anyway not allowed to walk on Har HaBayis with their shoes. So any dirt that ever fell on Har HaBayis got blown up and was kept clean. So it didn't need to be clean. But so therefore, these coins that fell would have just stayed there until someone found it. But in Yerushalayim itself, anything you find wouldn't have been here the day before. So Alma, what do you see from here? In Yerushalayim, since they clean the streets every day, we can take that to the bank. Literally, if you find money in the rest of the year, you can take it to the bank, knowing that it's chulin. And if you found it on Yom Tov, you can take it to the bank, knowing that it's meiser. What you found today must have fell today. It definitely didn't fall yesterday. So Hapanami, when you find this bread in your bread basket on Pesach, Nami Nema Karma Kama Ozo Bahaida Idnahu. Assume that any chametz bread was already removed when you did your changeover, and this bread that you found in your bread basket now is clearly going to be matzah. And Rashi sticks in over here very good. Amrina kamay ozu ustam tevois shemishtamshim ben oichlin. Most of the time, it's first in, first out. In computer language, it's called FIFO. First in, first out. So most bread boxes are FIFO. Ustam tevois shemishtamshim ben oichlin noitlin rishon b'dei shelo yishabshu. You'll always take out the oldest bread in the bread box because you want to make sure it doesn't get stale. It's like you're finishing off the milk quickly before it passes its best before date. The Choshekain, by us, the Mistama Botka Zeh, the owner of this bread basket, this homeowner, was boidigit orlar ba'asar, and therefore Bahai de Basrahi Umatzi. Therefore we can assume, thank you so much. Therefore we can assume that if there's bread found now in the bread box, the likelihood is that it's from Pesach and it's kosher for Pesach.
Why don't we say suffix deraisa l'chumra? This is a suffix not only deraisa, but this is an isser chorus.
Because it's not a suffix. That's the whole point. We can assume with certainty that the changeover was made and that this is new stuff. So Zok the Gemara. So I would say, why is there even a chance? Why would we argue that this is chametz? We know clearly this was after the turnover. So tomorrow, shiny hacha, the pusha mechiyachala. The matzah could only be 3 days old. This looks like it's 10 days old. So normally we would assume, yeah, this was after the changeover. But there's no way it would be so moldy or so dry if it was only baked 3 days ago. They didn't have matzah that was baked 6 months ago. They had their matzah baked fresh. So if that's the case, if you could tell that this is old from way before Pesach, well then kirab matzah, even if roiv of this box had matzah in it, might have it. This piece clearly has indicators that it was from before Pesach, so it's chametz. So Amarabba, you're right. Roiv is useless over here, and that's not what the Brisa says. What the Brisa is saying, don't say that this box had more matzah in it. If we're deep enough into Pesach, there's enough days of Pesach that would justify this level of ipush, this level of staleness, then we'll assume that this is matzah and it came from after the turnover. In fact, Gemara, ihachi pshita. Well, then it's pashut. If it's not rotten enough to prove that it must have been from before Pesach, well, then it's pashut that you would say it's after the turnover. Going back to our same assumption, there was a changeover done. So why do I need a brisa to tell me that I can use this matzah? This matzah is a lot staler than, let's say, for instance, on the fourth day of Pesach. It's way more stale than what you would typically expect to see a bread that's 4 days old. So now I'm concerned that maybe it is from before Pesach. Mao de Tema, given the Ipusha Maruba, since it's that stale that you for sure know it's from before Pesach and it's chametz, kamash malon, kivan shirabu yemei matzah iluya, since it's already 4 or 5 days into Pesach, and every day in the basket you threw fresh warm bread on top of this bread. I'm reading kol yoyme v'yoyme nahama chamima afa v'shadi iluya v'av shetvei. When you put more moist bread on top of this old bread, it increases, it hastens, it's getting stale, it's spoilage. So therefore, even though a normal piece of bread would not have gotten so stale so quickly, and therefore you might say that this is chametz from before Pesach, no, here you'll say that this matzah, its staleness accelerated because you kept on putting fresh, warm matzah on it, which caused it to get stale faster. So that's really the whole chiddush of the brisa is if you have matzah that you could justify that's not that stale, that you can argue that this staleness could have come even though it was only baked as matzah, you're allowed to use the matzah.
It's amazing. Nowadays, we would never think to use the same box.
Who would dream of using a bread basket on Pesach? That's right.
Right. Different times.
Do we actually follow the last thing, such as the raya we brought from the money found in Yerushalayim? You had a box that you kept money in, and you would use it for money of chulin and for money of meiser. And you found some money in there. In roiv chulin, if most of the money that you kept in this box was chulin, then you'll say it's chulin. You can use the money for chulin. In roiv meiser, if most of the money that you stored in this box was meiser, then you have to treat this money that you found like meiser. Why don't you go look at the last time you used this box? What did you use it for? And whatever you used it for the last time you used the box, assume that this coin is from there. Because we say that you always go after the last use. You use this box sometimes to hold chulun, sometimes hold meiser. But the ein yodea is membesoit. You don't remember that you found money now in the box, and you don't remember the last time you put money in this box. Was it meiser money or was it chulun money? You don't remember. So therefore, you figure out when I look back at the course of a year, do I use this box mostly for chulun or mostly for meiser? And if you use it mostly for meiser, you have to assume that the last time you use it for meiser. The coin is meiser. But if most of the time when you use this box, you use it for chulun, then you'll assume the last time you use it for chulun. You actually would use both meiser and chulun in the box simultaneously, and you would keep them in separate piles. So I can't go back to the last use. The last use, in fact, accommodated both. So you have to go back to roiv, and you'll say it probably is from the roiv of the coins that were there. Papa Amar, Your whole argument that you assume that this is from the last use is in the normal case. But here it's going to Ashach Beguma. You didn't find the money loose in the box. You found it stuck in a crevice. Once it's stuck in a crevice, then all bets are off. It might not have gotten stuck there the last time you used it. It could have gotten stuck there when you used it 10 times ago and you never noticed that coin stuck in the crevice. So therefore, you can't rely on the last use, so you have to go Basara. Okay. Now that's done with this sugya. So this sugya basically tells us that even though we made bedikas chametz, we still have to make bidul chametz. Now we're going to get into the bracha. A nice, interesting sugya. Amar Yehuda. Haboidek. If you make bedikas chametz, sarach sheyavak. You have to make a bracha on the bedika. Question is, why don't we make a shechiyanu on the bedika? It's a mitzvah because it doesn't happen every day. Why don't we make a shechiyanu? So the Pesachim say, I think it's brought down in the Mishnah Berurah, that bedikas chametz is one of the many activities that are part of the Pesach Yom Tov. We don't make a shechiyanu for one activity. Rather, the shechiyanu that we make on the Yom Tov includes all of the mitzvahs that we do. I'm not sure how that works with the matzah. It could be the matzah is a separate mitzvah from the Yom Tov the Pesach. This is part of the Yom Tov the Pesach that you're preparing your house for Pesach. So what is the bracha that you make? My mavar, Rav Papi Amar Mishmei Derava, Omer Levayer Chametz. Orech Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Levayer Asher Kedishanu B'Mitzvosav V'Tzivanu, Levayer Chametz. You've commanded me to destroy the chametz.
And the Sanic family Le'ilu Nishmas, their father Yehuda Aye Lev ben Avram Eliezer Lipa Sanic Olav Hashalom.
I think we got mixed in with the Avos Abanim.
We got Zoom bombed.
We got zoomed on by Avos Abanim. Okay, gewaltig. So, Rav Papi Amar Mishmei Derava, Levayer Chametz. That's the bracha you make. Rav Papi Amar Mishmei Derava, Al Bir Chametz. Now, Levayer, the main point here is when you make a bracha, you make the bracha over Lasiyasam. You make the bracha before you do the action. So the question is the Mashmoyos. So Zaktamar Bilavayr, when you make a shirk, Levayer Chametz, Kula Amaloi Pligi, the Vadi Labo Mash. Everybody agrees that that would be an appropriate bracha, and you're yoitz with that bracha, because the wording of the bracha say that you're going to be doing the bracha, you're going to be doing the mitzvah of Bir Chametz following the bracha. Keep ligi, the whole machloikus is Ba'al Bir. So everybody agrees Levayer will work. The question is should you make the bracha Al Bir? Mar Sover Mei Karamashma. One man holds that Al Bir has a connotation that it was already done, and you can't make such a bracha because it has to be over Lasiyasam. You have to make a bracha before. Mar Sover Labo Mashma. Al Bir also means that I'm going to be doing it in the future. Now the question is, Bechlal, why do you make on Bir? Isn't it Bedika? Why don't we make a bracha Al Bedika's chametz? So Rashi says, the bracha kaidim Bedika, Bir Hainu Nami Bedika. Bedika is an action that you take towards Bir. So you could use the bracha Al Bir chametz to cover you for the Bedika, especially since that the Bir chametz, the Bedika is really the first stage in the Bir process. We don't make a bracha Al Bir chametz when we burn the chametz, because the bracha Al Bir chametz that we did at the beginning of the whole activity by the Bedika covers us as well for the burning. So Zok the Gemara as follows: Meisvei, we make by Mila Baruch Asher Kedishanu B'Mitzvah V'Tzivanu Al Hamila. Right, that is the bracha that the Moel makes. If you hold that Al Hamila does not mean Lahaba, it means L'Sha'avar, how could you say the bracha Al Hamila by a bris? So according to Rav Papi Mishmei Derava, how does he understand the bracha Al Hamila? He should make a bracha Asher Kedishanu B'Mitzvah V'Tzivanu Lomo, to make a milah, because according to him, only that means in the future. So what else should the moil say? You want the moil to say lomo, name a lomo like levayer over here by Bir Chametz? It doesn't make sense to say that, because leisagi the lavi moil, the moil who does the bris, he doesn't have to do the bris. Hashem didn't tell him to do the bris. It's the father's responsibility to make a bris on his child. So how could a moil make a bracha? You commanded me to mal this child, you didn't command me to mal this child. So I can't say that. But al hamila is a general commandment. There I could say. So the reason why, although by levayer chametz, which is a mitzvah for me to do, I hold you up to levayer, by mila you can't say lomo because it's not my mitzvah. Avia ben mai. What if the father is doing the bris? Are you telling me, and the father is commanded to give the son a bris? Are you going to agree that when the father makes the bris, he should change the bracha of alamila and say lomo laspani? Is that what he's supposed to do? You're right. Yes, when a father makes a bris, the father doesn't make the same bracha as the moil. The father would say lomo. The shoichet makes such a bracha ala shchita. So tomorrow Hashem Nami, he can't say lishchot. Hachanami, heichenema. What should he say? You should say lishchot, nema lishchot, loy sagi the lavi ushachot. You don't have to shech the meat. Whenever meat is shechted, you don't have to shech. There's no mitzvah on you specifically to shech. You're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to eat non-kashach from the meat. But anybody can shech. So how could you say that you have a mitzvah to shech? You do have a mitzvah to shech your own carbon. You do have a mitzvah to shech your own carbon Pesach. So maybe there you should say lishchot. So according to a puppy, if you maled your own son, you should say lomel, and if you shechted your own carbon, you should say lishchot. But Rav Papa held al bir chametz is good, just like al hamila and al ashchita. You put your lulav together, you put together the arbaminim. So when you do that, mevarach shechiyanu v'kimanu v'yanu lasmanaseh. Not loylatis boy. If you pick it up to be yoychet the mitzvah, Oimer you say asher klishanu b'mitzvah v'yanu al natilas lulav. For the Gemara, the same kasha, according to your papa, you should say li toy lasalulav. The moment you pick it up, novakpe, you're yoytze right away. So therefore, you can't say litay lulav because when you have it in your hand, you've already yoytze the mitzvah. In fact, Gemara, if you're claiming that you already yoytze the mitzvah, ihachi lotes boy, you're lifting up the lulav to be yoytze is the lashon habraysa. You were yoytze already. Yotze boy meboy. So the braysa should have said, not like the yotze boy. But from the lashon habraysa, it's pretty clear that you weren't yoytze yet when you lifted it up. Zok the Gemara, you're right. The braysa's wording is wrong. It shouldn't have said not like lotus boy because by the time you picked it up, you were yoytze already. So why did it use a lashon of lotus boy in the future if in fact you're yoytze the moment you pick it up? So Gemara, we should become boy the Mishnah Seifa, since the Seifa of the same braysa discusses the same system by sukkah. Leisha v'sukkah. Tanami, Reisha nami, so it uses a lashon of the future by lulav lotus boy. Tikatoni Seifa. What does it say in the Seifa? If you make a sukkah, Eimer Baruch Ato Hashem, Shechiyon v'kimon v'yon lasman aseh. But nichnas leishava, you went into to sit in it, but you were not yet mekayim the mitzvah. Eimer Baruch Asher K'Yishon v'mitzvah is on the leishav mitzvah. So really,
why can't you say, Yosy? Why can't you say the same thing by lulav? As we know, you pick it up upside down. You're not yoytze sukkah yet, lulav yet.
You asked me a kasha. You asked me a zaydik kasha. By lulav, you're not yoytze before you make your bracha because we pick it up upside down.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful kasha. The other kasha you can ask is, and if you don't pick it up upside down, how b'chlal could you make your bracha? You were yoytze already.
No, then I can tell you what I asked you last time. You had a das not to be yoytze. That helps you.
Beautiful. So let's see Toshis. Toshis discusses your question. Lotes, for Gemara, why did it say Lotes? You were already yoytze. You picked up the lulav. Zok Toshis Lotes mashma shelo yotze adai. The word Lotes is mashma that you were not yet yoytze the mitzvah. But natila with lifting it up. How is it possible that you were not yoytze the mitzvah when you pick up a lulav? If you turn the lulav over or the esrog over, then you won't be yoytze. Because you're reading the besukah. You're only yoytze if you hold it in the same orientation that it grows. Oi, like what Moshe says, I should not loy shaloi lotus boy. If you picked it up and you had kavanah not to be yotza, then in fact you won't be yotza. But Zok Toshis, when you pick up your lulav, ain't tzarich lahikvah. You don't have to turn it over. Ketapir shri, like the Re says, because even though when you pick it up your yotza, but you're not finished being yotza the mitzvah, there's still more mitzvah that you need to do. Even shetzarich l'nanei b'halel, or mishum sheni right to lotus place of the tefillah. So the Re is saying that we don't have to pick up our nesek upside down, either because even though we might have been yotza picking it up the moment we picked it up, but there's still more mitzvah than him. Or if you have kavanah not to be yotza, then it's not a problem. But I'll call upon him, even if you were yotza, there's no problem because there's more mitzvah coming. Okay, so we have all these different shilas about if you can make al bir chametz or not, and all of the rayas that you could were inconclusive. The hilchos are now the Gemara Paskins al bir chametz. Everybody holds halacha l'maaseh you can make a bracha al bir chametz. So the problem here is, let's see Rashi. The hilchos al bir chametz nami laba mashma. It also means laba. The gabamil nami loish navi ben meinish alma. By the Avia Ben, we paskin not like we said earlier that Avia Ben will say Lamo. Rather, even the Avia Ben, if he makes the bris, he also says Al Hamila. The Labo Mashma, Al Mila Nami, Kolomel Nami. So the Al Mila also has the connotation of Lahaba. And that was the Machloikis. Does Al Bir Chametz, Al Hamila, does it have the Mashmois of Lahaba or not? If it doesn't have the Mashmois of Lahaba, you cannot use it over Lasiyosef. But we paskin that it does have the Mashmois of Lahaba. So they ask a Shaila. I don't understand. Al bir chametz, it's a shayla with lavar not. Livayir chametz is for sure lavar. So why pick a nusach of al bir chametz, which is questionable if it means lavar, if you can just say livayir chametz? It's so much simpler. So Tosfos says al bir chametz. It's yochal hu loy merkein. It's not that that's what you're supposed to do. You could also make the bracha of bir chametz. She'av zeh Allah shoyin mashma labo, because it also is labo and mashma as well. Or he's a place shema davka bir chametz. Maybe davka bir chametz and not levar chametz. But yesh tam bebrachas, and there's a reason why you should do it that way. V'ri loy mota tam lechol brachas. And the Re couldn't find a reason in all brachas why you should say it. Al bir. But Rabbi Elvin spoke of one of the reasons, it's a difficult reason to understand. One of the reasons you make al bir is for to show that you're a Talmud Chacham, and you levayer anybody can make, because everybody knows that connotates in the future. Al bir is a controversial nusach, and you know the Gemara is maskana, and you know the Gemara accepted it. That's why b'dafka you want to do al bir. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of mitzvahs that we make the bracha one way or the other, and it's not clear why. Like lehadlik ner shel Chanukah, but al mikra megillah. So there's different svaras thrown around why it's one way versus the other way. And one of the svaras is if you're doing the mitzvah yourself, then you'll make the bracha leh, like leh havik ner shel Chanukah. But if it's a part of like a communal mitzvah, then it'll be al mikra megillah, where someone's being moitzed. Al bir chametz is also a mitzvah you're doing by yourself. So it's not crystal clear why you make sometimes al bir chametz and sometimes. And by tefillin, we say lehaniach tefillin and al mitzvah, we do both. So I don't have a clear explanation as to why each bracha is the way it is. If someone has any information on it, I would ask you to share it now.
Actually, interesting. In the morning, I think you say la suk b'divrei Torah.
Yeah.
Is that what you say? So I say al divrei Torah.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean like the Beis Yosef Shita?
Yeah. So yours is le, mine is
So
al.
maybe, but Ashkenazi we want to learn ourselves, and when it's them, as long as the Chacham learns, it's good enough.
Maybe.
But for you yourself, you learn yourself. You're a Talmud Chacham yourself, so that doesn't work for you.
Now I'm learning about you. So I'm learning about you. So I say
the Chacham also says al divrei Torah. I hear. So I don't know the reason. Rabbi Elvin didn't say a clear reason, and wherever else I looked it up, but I couldn't find anybody who who explains why in each mitzvah you do it that way. And even Tosha says, "V'rilay matatam l'chol habrachos." Okay, let's see the Gemara right here. To Chula al once we got through this whole shaila, one thing is hands down. Everybody agrees that meikar bin the bracha meikar bin lebrucha. The bracha has to be before the mitzvah. That's hands down. The question was merely, does this bracha have the right meaning? Does it mean that I'm going to do it in the future? But that's agreed by everybody that the bracha has to be before the mitzvah. You know, where do you know this from? All mitzvahs, you make a bracha on it over lasiyos. My mashma, the high over lishni de'aktumahu. How do you know that over means before? I'm not by Yitzchak. Vayoretz achimatz der hakikar. Vayavar sakushi, he overtook the kushi. So you see, vayavar means before. He came before the kushi. So right off the bat, we have to ask, just like we asked at the beginning of the Masechta of Orla Ba'aser, if over is not clear what it means, so how come we didn't say Kol HaMitzvahs Mavarach Aleim Kodim Lasiyos? And then it would be clear. Why did Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel pick a word that's not clear? So they say that Kodim could mean any time before. Over means directly before, immediately before. And that's why he wanted to use the word over. Abaya Mamahacha, it says, who over name, and this is talking about when they greeted Esav. This is next week's parsha. Who over name, V'ishtachu Arta Sheva Pamim Ad Gishta Edochiv. This is referring to when Yaakov met Esav. Again, he was in front of them before them. This is Micha. Their king went in front of them. So you see, Vayavar means in front. Rav says, Chutz minat tefillah v'shofar. There are two mitzvahs where you make the bracha after the fact, tefillah and shofar. So let's look at tefillah first. Rashi says, what type of tefillah are we talking about? Actually, let's learn a little bit more. Bishlam tefillah, I understand why tefillah you have to make the bracha afterwards. Takati govra lechazi. The person before he toivels cannot make the bracha. Ela shofar my time. Why don't you make the bracha before tkiyah shofar? And if you're going to say mishum dilma nekalkal tkiyah, because if you make the bracha before, it might be a bracha vatala because you'll mess up the tkiyah. Well, the afilu shchita milanami you should make afterwards because you might mess up the shchita, you might mess up the milah. The only mitzvah that you make the bracha afterwards is tefillah. So let's see what it means. That kati gavar lechazi. Zok Rashi, it means going tefillah to balkari. A balkari cannot make a bracha before he toivels. The kaim alon bebrachas she'aser b'divrei Torah u'bebracha. Since a balkari cannot make a bracha, therefore he has to toivel first and then make the bracha. The Ezra tikkun tefillah lebalakarion l'divrei Torah. U'mishamahu tefillah tikkun b'chol tefillas b'chasan lebesayt. Since there's one tefillah that you cannot make the bracha before, like the tefillah of balkari, because of that, all tefillas, the minig is to make the bracha afterwards. That's what Rashi says. Tosfos argues. Tosfos ala tefillah. Omer Rabbeinu Tam, b'shem Agoyim, davka b'tefillas ger. Which tefillah can you not make the bracha before? Not a balkari. A balkari can make the bracha before. A ger who toivels can make the bracha before. The lechazi kodim tefillah, because before he toivels he's not a yid yet. The lemotzel member v'tzivanu. Takati nachrihu. So a ger who's toiveling to become a yid, he cannot make the bracha before, because before he toivels, he's not a yid yet. Aval shar chayvei tefillah kagoyin balkari uchayotzebay muter levarach. A balkari is allowed to make a bracha. Kidorim perek mishamezu no galma b'tata sabik Rabbi Yehuda the balkari sheyachal l'espalel ulevarach v'lilmoid kodim tefillah. So we hold, and that's what we hold. A balkari is allowed to make brachas. Nevertheless, afal pikin imari the inligar benoshim shemavarchos acher tefillah. You shouldn't get upset at women who don't make the bracha before the tefillah, who only make the bracha after the tefillah, because kivam the ikar tefillah's ger the lemochi levarech. Since there's the tefillah of the ger who has to make the bracha after the tefillah, lo chilku across the board they allow you to make the bracha on tefillah on all tefillahs after you make the tefillah. V'chein b'netilah shadayim lo chilku b'netilah shel acher beisakisei the lemochi levarech kodim. The halacha is why do we make an Al Netilas Yadayim after we wash? Because when we wash after we go to the bathroom, we wouldn't be able to make the bracha Al Netilas Yadayim before we wash. So you have to make the bracha afterwards. Because of that, all washing, we make the bracha Al Netilas Yadayim after we wash. Miu v'netila yesh ta'am acher levorach acher netila kodem nigul. By netila, there's another reason why you would make the bracha after the netila before drying your hands. Ki damrin ha'oichel lechem v'nigul yadayim kilo oichel lechem tamei. It's because the niguv is part of the mitzvah. So you're still over l'siyasam if you made the bracha after you wash your hands before you dry them. V'yesh mefarshim b'chol tfilas kamar. By every tefillah, you always only make the bracha after you type it. Why? The gavra leichazi, because a person could never make a bracha. Why? Because the kodim shared l'mayim. Now we're assuming that you have to climb down some cliff to get to the body of water. So the kodim shared l'mayim, before you get down and you're right at the water's edge, you don't have to make a bracha. You know why? Dilma mishum bi'asusa demaya minna v'letavol. You might be climbing down the mountain, climbing down the cliff to get to the body of water, and you're going to chicken out. If you make the bracha before you start climbing down, then this could be a bracha levatola if you chicken out. And by the time you're right at the edge of the water, also orim, then you're naked already. So practically speaking, there's no place where you could make the bracha. I don't understand why you can't make the bracha when you get down to the bottom before you're orim. Unless you're getting undressed as you're climbing down the mountain. I don't know exactly how it works. But I'll call upon him. By tefillah, it seems like everybody holds that you're allowed to make the bracha afterwards. Although, it's only by a ger where it's mandatory that you have to make the bracha afterwards, according to places. According to Rashi, a Balkari as well could only make the bracha afterwards. I mean, as far as I know, we don't make brachas on tefillah, even on Balkari. We don't talk, only women make a bracha on tefillah. Because that's the more about it. What are you supposed to use to make the chametz? The light of a candle. We know that immediately. How do we know that? Amar Chista, Lamadnu Mitzia mi Mitzia. It says Bal Yimotzei by us, and it says another pasuk that has the word Mitzia in it, and that's where they were looking for Binyamin's becher, for the becher that Binyamin stole. To the Chabis Bigod Bagadol Heichel of a cotton color. And it says Vayimtza Hagaviyah B'Amtachas Binyamin. So it says Vayimtza. So that connects our responsibility to look for chametz with Bal Yimotzei to the pasuk of Binyamin. U'Mitzia Mechipush. And in the Mitzia of Binyamin, it has the word Vayechapes. It has the chipus there, which means searching. The chipus mechipush. There's another pasuk that talks about chipus. It says V'Hoya Be'esahi. Achapes is Yerushalayim, but Neiros. I'm going to examine Yerushalayim with Neiros, looking for Averis. And I'm going to catch the people who did Averis. So here it says Achapes, and the Chibush Meneiros, and it says Achapes is Yerushalayim, but Neiros. So it has a connection to looking with Neiros. And then there's another pasuk that says V'Neiros Miner, and then the next pasuk says Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. So you see from Ner you learn Ner that it's a single Ner. So now the Gemara goes to the Mitzim Mitzia, Ksiv Hacha Shivas Yomim Sar Lo Yimotzi B'Vatechem, Uksiv Hasem Vaychapes Begadol Heichel Ubekatim Kila. Vayimotzi the Gvia in Antachos Binyamin. Umitzim Mechibosh today, and Mitzia that it says by when they found the Becher in that same pasuk by Binyamin, it says Vaychapes. So it's in its own pasuk today, and then the chibush meneris, and then the chibush of the story of looking for the becher. You learn chibush from the pasuk where Hashem said, "I'm going to look through Yerushalayim," and the chibush meneris, and chibush you learn from Neris. The chsiv beisiyah chavis Yerushalayim b'neris, and v'neris mener the chsiv ner Hashem nishmas adam chayves kol chadrevav. Tana the very bishmol leil yudalid. And he quotes the same we already have Neiros. Why do we need the next pasuk of Ner? The Chitema, Hai Ba'esahi, kulahu. Maybe you don't have a good raya from the pasuk, because when Hashem is looking to find Averis, Hashem doesn't really want to find those Averis. So Hashem is not going to use a strong flashlight to be able to find Averis. So maybe that pasuk is kulahu the Gomer Rachmana loiba digna la Yerushalayim b'nehayra davruka the nafish nehayra tuva. I'm not going to search Yerushalayim really well with a good light because I don't really want to find Averis. I'm going to use a very small little candle with a little wick, so it shouldn't be a strong light, because the avoyin rabba mishtakach, mishtakach. This way, I'll only be able to find very big averis, but I won't be able to find small averis. So from that pasuk, you can't bring a raya, because there's the pasuk where the lights that are being used, Hashem's b'davka looking not to be able to find things. Mashenkin, when it comes to chametz, maybe you would need something different because we're trying to actually find the chametz. So Tashma ner Hashem nishmas adam. So now you might ask, let's look at these pasuk. By ner Hashem nishmas adam, it also has the word in it chayfesh kol chadr b'atim. So why couldn't we totally delete this pasuk? Let's totally delete the pasuk of Be'esahi Achapesh Yishalayim and the chipush of Binyamin. Why can we learn directly from the chipush of Chaypish Kol Chadri Batan, and there it says Ner Hashem? So why b'chalal do we need this pasuk? So that's what Tosfos says. When Ner Shminer v'Kasha the Havel Elamemer chipush miner v'loy Ner Shminer. Why do we even need the pasuk of Hashem looking at Yerushalayim with Neris? It's not necessary. The next pasuk has the word chipush in it anyway. The chipush loykaya ner. In the pasuk of Ner Hashem nishmas adam, Chayfish kol chadr batan is another clause. Ner Hashem nishmas adam pause, and Chayfish kol chadr batan is a separate clause. So since this is not in the same clause, we don't say that this works to shtel psuta minyamin. But over here it's ve'emi echabes Yerushalayim b'neris, that connects them. So sometimes the kachish l'farsh v'yishlomi the chipush l'kayner l'kachish l'farsh yal chipush the ner v'chipush Yerushalayim. We learn chipush from there, which is the final pasuk of Ner Hashem, from the chipush of Yerushalayim, shiba neres. The oisen neres miner, and you learn those neres from there. That one there is not also shaper. The hashta tzarach l'suyakra the chipush neres l'sagi b'kra the Ner Hashem nishmas adam. So I just want to add one little nakuda. There's a whole shaila if you're supposed to put out 10 pieces of bread when you make v'dikas chametz. There are those who hold you should put out 10 pieces of bread, because if not, it might be a bracha levatala. The Mishnah Berurah brings it down. Then the Mishnah Berurah says, those who hold you don't need to put out 10 pieces of bread, because first of all, even if you don't find, it's not a bracha levatala, because the mitzvah is al beer chametz. It's part of the beer process. It doesn't say you have to find chametz. The beer process is to search as well. So you don't need to put out 10. But there are those who say that a remedy that you have to put out 10 is from Binyamin. Because when Yosef was going to look for Binyamin's becher, he knew it was there. He planted it. Yet it still went to look for it. So since Binyamin, that story is brought down as one of the Mekayers that you need in there, so that's a smach that you put the bread out, even though you know where it is, you put it out for the B'dika, just like Yosef did with the becher of that he hid by Binyamin's knapsack. There are those who I know somebody who gets very frustrated when they send him the 10 pieces of chametz as fundraisers, and he sends them back to the person who sent it to him, and he makes sure that it arrives back by them on Pesach.